Hey everybody, welcome back to Vegas Weekly for Saturday, May the 14th, 2022. We have an interesting kind of a take on a show for you today. We are going to introduce you to a brand new YouTube channel. Actually, it is pretty new, but I think is worth your time. Before we get started, I wanted to thank some of the people that make this show possible. All right, yeah, special thanks to all those folks and all the people that join us on the show here every week. A little quick update. This is obviously not the fancy show, but we have been playing around a little bit with the video editor and importing some video and stills into the computer. So I'd say we're on target to pull that off over the next 4 or 5 weeks, so continue to look for that. Not a lot of big news in Las Vegas this week. It was a kind of an interesting story. I'm not sure exactly how to take it. That all of the employees at the Cosmopolitan, which of course is about to come under the MGM Rewards umbrella here any day now, received a $5,000 bonus, which seems very generous. So you're an Cosmo employee, congratulations. I don't know what that means. Part of me doesn't know how to take it. Part of me thinks, is this just like, okay, here's $5,000 because everything's about to go to hell, so enjoy. But hopefully that's not the case. Speaking of everything going to you-know-where, been a lot of folks over the last couple of years that have been talking about some of the changes in Las Vegas, and certainly over the last 6 to 9 months, as we've seen visitor traffic ratchet up once again. There is, I think, the perception, and as we'll see here over the course of the next few minutes, somewhat the reality that things are getting more expensive, that the value is not there as much as it was, not just for the average visitor, but also for the repeat visitor that counts on those room comps and various perks as part of their gambling and traveling experience. And so I wanted to kind of share my own personal journey on that and give you some thoughts on where I think that whole process is right now in Las Vegas. But before I go on a rant here, it's really not going to be that much of a rant, I did want to introduce our YouTube channel of the week. As I said, a fairly new channel. I mean, they have some videos from several years ago, but they're not really probably of much interest to the average viewer. But since the start of this year, they've been making, I think they've been to Vegas a couple of times, and I've made some really interesting content. I thought I'd share it with you. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Colin and Jenny of Visit Vegas with DJ and Jenny and me. As you can see, they only have like 100 subscribers, but they've also only been doing this for the last 5 or 6 months, I guess. One of my good friends who keeps an eye on this sort of thing tipped me off to their channel a few weeks ago, and I had a chance to watch some of their videos this week, and I really enjoyed it. They do a lot of what I would call visual storytelling. There is a tendency... There's a tendency for some of us to narrate too much, perhaps, to talk to the camera too much, as I'm doing right now. Even when we're in Las Vegas, you get 5 minutes of footage, and then you get like 15 minutes of me telling you what I did. But for me, anyway, I thought that their channel had a lot of, like I said, good visual storytelling, showing you what they're doing, seeing what they're seeing. Whether they go to a restaurant, whether they're gambling. They had a great, I think their first main sort of Vegas video was a sort of travel log of them driving all the way from Canada, where they live, to Las Vegas, and some great, shots along the way, which was pretty cool. But yeah, definitely take a look at their channel. I think they're an interesting couple. And I will put a link, as always, to their channel in the show notes below, so I hope that you will check them out and subscribe. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about comps. Are they getting harder to come by? Wanted to share my sort of personal journey through comps. First time I ever got a comped room, actually it was a couple of times, was was way back in 1998. I got a 2 free nights at the old Stardust Motor Lodge. If anybody's been around long enough to remember that, those rooms were pretty much worth nothing. So it was a good comp. But and then I got a couple of nights at the Stratosphere for some reason. And over time, I became a little bit more of a gambler. I had more of a budget over time, and more frequently, my rooms were free or heavily discounted. For a number of years, I stayed often off the Strip. I had a pretty good relationship with Boyd, and so I stayed at Orleans and Gold Coast quite a bit, and even downtown at some of their properties there. Around 2016, I guess it was, I had some really good luck early in the year and won a fair amount of money, and sort of got into the habit of making my way to my local Harrah's Casino in Kansas City. Became like a pretty big time regular. I don't know how many times I went up there, but I was able to sort of hold my own. And the longest short story of it is that by sort of midsummer, I had earned diamond status with what was that time Total Rewards, then later became Caesars Rewards. And from that point on, not necessarily just because of that, but that was certainly one of the reasons, that I started getting room comps in Las Vegas. And I had not spent a lot of my trips on the Strip proper. So there were a lot of hotels I hadn't stayed at. So being able to stay for free at places like Flamingo or Bally's or Planet Hollywood, and even I actually got room comps at Caesars and Cromwell as well. So over the course of the next several years, I pretty much confined my play, at least on the Strip, to those Caesars properties, and was treated well. I have no complaints. They are not the most glamorous properties on the Strip. Not the nicest places. Like I said, I think Caesars obviously has some great rooms. When I stayed there, it was really good. I like Cromwell a lot. And I think Paris is an underrated hotel. Planet Hollywood, I like the properties by and large. So that's pretty much where I played. And I typically had a gambling budget of around $500 a day. That's the most I would lose. Now, hopefully I didn't get to that point. And I usually tried to earn around 500 tier credits a day. And came pretty close to those averages over time, which typically not only gave me room comps in Las Vegas almost all the time, not the best rooms at Caesars, certainly not Nobu, I wasn't expecting that. And there were some times Cromwell was shut out, but most of the properties, it was almost every day of the year. And I wasn't paying resort fees, so obviously that's where I was going to stay. And you know, the nice thing about those properties, and I guess nice thing about the MGM properties as well, is they're all kind of linked together. So on an average day, I would just sort of make my way up and down the Strip, checking out those properties depending on where I was staying. And it worked out pretty well. And I continued to have diamond status in 2017, and then I earned it again in 2018. So I had it through the year 2019. Now 2019, my gambling budget I pulled back a little bit. I didn't go visit the casino in Kansas City as much. I think that year ended up at the end of the season or the end of the year with like platinum status. But I could still normally get free rooms most places. But I kind of stopped, sort of confining myself to those properties. For one thing, I started utilizing the Wynn Slots app and was able to get some free rooms at least through that app. I really enjoyed spending time there and started to explore the MGM properties a little more, and even got to stay there a couple of times on a couple of occasions because, again, of the My Vegas comps. So through those slot games, I was introduced to some properties that I hadn't stayed at before. And it was kind of fun to be in a different environment. So the last trip or two, I have played mostly at the MGM properties. I will say I spent one night on this past trip at Bally's and earned about 400 tier credits, which actually is more than I thought I would earn. Now I was there during the day, around from about noon actually, and didn't check out till about 11 the next morning. So I'm guessing my play was sort of split up over 2 days, which would only mean an average of around 200 tier credits. But typically I found, the 200 to 300 tier credits normally would get you room comps midweek at the sort of lower end properties in Las Vegas. That's not been my observation as I've gone in and looked. Now I do have some free nights. Bally's does seem to be the place I have the most free nights. So I don't know if they're adjusting that algorithm somehow to take into account where you played. It may just be because the place is undergoing some renovation, and so it may not be the most desirable place to stay. But otherwise, the room comps with Caesars have practically evaporated for me. That has not been the case with MGM. Now, on this last trip, I had more of like a $300 a day gambling budget. And I had some days where it went a little too fast. I stayed at an MGM property 5 of the 6 nights that I was in town. And there were a couple of days I didn't gamble much at all in and around the time of the Keno wedding. But on the other days, I gambled, I would say, pretty hard, at least for me. And I earned, I guess, over the course of that around 5,000 tier credits or whatever they call them with MGM. And it hasn't really seemed to affect the offers that I was getting. I typically can get 4 nights at Excalibur or Luxor, 3 nights usually at like Mirage, MGM Grand, maybe Park MGM, couple of nights at Mandalay Bay, sometimes also Delano. I'm trying to think where else. Am I missing something? As far as Bellagio and Aria, I just get a discounted room rate, which is not shocking. Same thing with Badara or MGM Signature, those properties as well. New York also, I think, is usually 3 nights. With some moderate food credit around 50, and then it's only give me like $10 worth of free play. Now listen, like I said, I didn't gamble a ton, otherwise it would have had a much higher tier credit. But I thought that's pretty fair. And I'll probably continue to take advantage of those MGM comps. But I thought maybe, given the fact that I had concentrated my play there, that the offers might improve, but they really haven't. They've stayed about the same as they were going into March. So over time, I've kind of lost my niche with Boyd. I've stayed at a couple of their properties and then not really played very much. They kind of noticed that after a while. I played a fair amount at Cosmo on the last trip, but by my standards anyway, but it mostly is maybe you can get $99 or $79 room nights midweek once in a while with no resort fee, which isn't terrible. And my play at Wynn, which again, I'm not shocked by this at all, typically only entitles me to discounted rates around 100 to 120 a night with some perks thrown in, but you're also paying resort fees. But so I don't know. My perception is that Caesars has in particular gotten tighter. I don't know if that's anyone else's perception. Obviously, they did away with the diamond lounges and some of those perks. MGM, again, it's harder for me to gauge that because I haven't played with them as long, but I'd be curious about some feedback from those people that have, particularly people that have gone to Vegas recently. What's been your thoughts on coming back and seeing your room offers or any other perks of that kind? But yeah, I do feel like they're kind of taking advantage of the fact that people are back and they're trying to squeeze as many dollars out of us as they can. And yeah, so I'd be interested in your feedback on that. Is the small-time gambler going to kind of get shut out of the free rooms? I guess if they can sell them, why should they give them away? Tell me about it. All right, we will talk more about Las Vegas when I join you again next week on Vegas Weekly. Until then, I hope that you have a great, lucky, and healthy week. We'll see you all again real soon. Bye-bye.